What's up, guys? Welcome back to Newswave. Well, it turns out Nintendo did have a curveball for us this week, a game announcement that people have been asking for quite some time, actually years now, and they just sort of did it out of nowhere, shocking everyone, and we're going to go over the latest Switch announcement here today. Also, we are going to be talking about Indiana Jones as we did get previews that went live, giving us ideas to what to expect heading into December, and then Sony shed some light on their plans for Concord going forward, and it turns out it's not great news for Firewalk. So if you guys enjoy these videos, make sure you hit that like button, helps it a ton. And if you're new here to the Spawn Wave channel, make sure you subscribe down below. And of course, members of the channel do get Newswave early. If you would like to learn more about that, click the join button down below this video. And we're gonna start today with Mass Effect, specifically concerns that started to pop up after the initial reveal for Dragon Age: The Veilguard, showing what looked kind of like a Pixar style for the characters, and I think it clashes a bit with the environments, but it was certainly noticeable the art style and the direction they have with the designs around these different character models. Well, we can see this posted up. This is from the director for the Mass Effect series over at Bioware, saying, lots of people ask me about Mass Effect now that Veilguard reviews are out and October 31st is close. Both are from the studio, but Mass Effect is Mass Effect. How you bring a sci-fi RPG to life is different than other genres or IPs and has to have different kinds of love. Michael Gamble goes on to say, regarding tone questions, Mass Effect will maintain the mature tone of the original trilogy. This is all I'm going to say for now. I pressed a little bit about that Pixar look that we have right now for Veilguard. Says, I'm not sure I agree with the Pixar thing, but Mass Effect is photorealistic and will be as long as I'm running it. So that should hopefully put concerns to bed around Mass Effect maybe adopting a similar look. Now, this in a sense would be more mature and more photorealistic. So my biggest thing is, can they bounce back after what happened with Mass Effect Andromeda? Dragon Age: The Veilguard is still Bioware, but it's kind of like separate team sort of within Bioware, different director and stuff. So I think Mass Effect will stand on its own, and it's probably going to be a while. We're thinking years from now. Maybe we'll get lucky and it's out in 2027, 2028. But I'm hoping they can turn things around after what happened with Mass Effect Andromeda. I guess we'll see towards the end of this current generation. Also, we did get a release date for Power Rangers Rita's Rewind. We can see this was posted up on the official account. This is from Digital Eclipse saying, when can I play Rita's Rewind? December 10th, 2024. Save the date to save the world on PS4, PS5, Xbox One, Xbox Series, Nintendo Switch, and Steam. The trailer here, by the way, looks awesome. Getting a lot of like the old school Super Nintendo vibes. If you remember, we had there was a beat 'em up. I feel like I played it on the Super Nintendo. I think it was on the Genesis as well, but it was an awesome time back then for just Power Rangers in general. And I think there was at least that one that translated over well to video game format. Now, they were also asked about online co-op play. They do say it's going to launch with both local and online, but due to a technical snag, it's looking like they would launch with 2-player online, but the plan is to follow quickly with support for 5 players online. That is awesome. I like the way it looks. I like the resurgence we've seen for these old school retro style beat 'em ups like over the past several years now. And they also have some fun little twists in there. For example, when they went into like the Zords and went almost this first person view and stuff, see the Green Ranger there. So this is really, really cool. I'm looking forward to really towards the end of this year now in December with Indiana Jones and Power Rangers. Should be a fun way to close out the year. Oh, and for all of you Ys fans out there, we did get an official release date, which we can see. This is for Ys Memoire, The Oath in Felghana. That is coming to the West January 7th, 2025. It had previously released in Japan. That was first half of 2023. It's a remaster of the PSP game from nearly 15 years ago now, and it's a situation where it takes Falcom a while to get a game from Japan, then out to the Western audience. And in this case, it coming in January, there will be a $30 digital version, as well as what looks like a physical release bundle. So they have all kinds of extra goodies in there, that coming in at $60. They do mention things like an acrylic diorama stand, a CD soundtrack, a microfiber cloth, and more there. So really cool stuff there for Ys fans to have this game finally coming out to the West. Just want to keep an eye on that physical copy if that's what you're looking for. And guys, with some of the quick news out of the way, let's get into the bigger stuff. Let's start right away with a massive announcement from Nintendo that they just nonchalantly released on a Tuesday, just out of nowhere. Oh yeah, here, Xenoblade Chronicles X is coming to the Switch. This was posted up over on their official account, where they say just Xenoblade Chronicles X Definitive Edition coming to Nintendo Switch on March 20th, 2025. And they also have a full trailer for it, which visually speaking, it has seen a fairly significant upgrade, I would say. Very much so reminds me of the jump, maybe not as severe because that was the Wii to the Switch. This is the Wii U to the Switch, but very similar to me what I saw with Xenoblade Chronicles when that got moved up from the Wii then to the Switch recently this generation. There's a pretty big visual leap, still one here, and the thing that's very interesting about this is they say its visually enhanced version includes newly added story elements and more. I also saw on the page for it, on the store page, it appears they've managed to actually shrink down the file size for it, which, I mean, that is the enjoyable thing with the Switch. The nice thing about this generation is we're very used to sub 10 gigabyte file sizes, that when you see a 15 gigabyte file size for something like Chronicles X, you just go, whoa, okay, hold on a minute, that's pretty large, when really in the grand scope of things, when we're used to 150 gigabyte plus games on other platforms, it's pretty impressive there. Now, this is a game that people weren't sure if Nintendo would be able to get this over to the Switch. There were a lot of tie-ins, obviously, with the Wii U gamepad, which I'm sure is just a massive hurdle for any game that's trying to make the jump from the Wii U to the Switch. Gotta figure out how you can incorporate that then into just the one screen on the Switch in handheld mode, or being used on the TV when you have it docked. And there are also some online elements to this as well, but it seems like they're going above and beyond after getting that worked out. Also adding in new story elements and stuff. So this is really, really cool. I mean, to me, it was one of the most impressive games on the Wii U from just the overall scope, the visuals, some of the ideas in it, and obviously people love kind of the Xenoblade in general with that fantasy, but then also mixed in, you have mechs and stuff here with the skells that you can fly around in, and it has more of a realistic sort of art style to it compared to some of the other Xenoblade games, but this is exciting stuff. I wasn't sure if we would actually get this over to the Switch, mostly because, yes, we are getting towards the end of the generation, and it's like, are they going to be able to get that last Xenoblade there? And they have. And in fact, if you look at the Switch now, technically, this is the Xenoblade system. Like, Xenoblade fans completely won out with this generation, since now you have a system that plays all of them. I mean, if you're even curious about Xenoblade and you're trying to get into the franchise, the series, you're going to want to buy a Switch because they're all available. And that's actually very impressive just for a system in general. But then you really look over the Switch as a whole. Yes, it got a lot of the Wii U ports over, but even from past Nintendo systems, they're all there with the NSO. And you start to really take a step back and look around at that landscape, and you're like, wow, the Switch is, I think it's pretty clear, it's Nintendo's best system they've ever made. But then you start to make a case for it just in general for gaming with how vast the library is. And I mentioned how nonchalantly Nintendo just sort of announced it. Just, here it is on Twitter. Yep, Xenoblade Chronicles X. You guys have been asking for this nonstop for years. Yeah, you can pick it up in a couple of months to start off 2025. And it's funny because you think about it, it's been a little while since we've had a Wii U port. I had to think, I was like, okay, when was the last time? And I feel like it was Bowser's Fury. So Mario 3D World Bowser's Fury. That was 2021. So by the time technically this comes out, it'll be a 3-year gap, and they just randomly show up on Twitter and hold like a very incredibly mini Twitter direct. I think people were even wondering if there'd be some other announcement, which at this point, it'll probably be like NSO games for NES and Super Nintendo, and that'll be the little Twitter direct they have this week. But that alone was massive, and it's extremely exciting to see. So yeah, Xenoblade fans certainly got what they were looking for here, not only with Chronicles X, but also just the Switch in general. A platform that has all of the games, actually better than ever, visually, content-wise, the whole thing. So really, really cool stuff there. Next up, let's talk about Indiana Jones and the Great Circle. This game is slated to come out in the first week of December, and there's still been a lot of questions around how exactly the game is going to play, like the moment-to-moment gameplay, because from what I've seen so far, while there have been some flashes of it, it's kind of been presented as it's going to be sort of like another movie or a game heavily playing into cutscenes and the lore of Indiana Jones, almost being presented as a new movie for it, really. But we did have some hands-on previews that were published by many different outlets, and I figured we go over some of the information here as I pulled out some highlights, which this was actually from a just about a 3-hour hands-on period for different outlets, and it's heavily mixed in, seemingly cinematic elements with stealth gameplay. In fact, stealth gameplay seemed to be at the top of the list for all the descriptions, at least of this play session. And the stealth kills, you're going through, you're sneaking sneaking around as Indy, the stealth kills rely on you finding one-time use items in the environment. So, for example, if you find a bottle, you would use that to knock out a guard right over the head, but then that bottle breaks and you can't use it anymore. Same thing if you find a frying pan or shovels, and that's at least an interesting way to sort of go about these stealth kills or stealth gameplay, is to then have to sort of improvise and find things around you can use at that point in time. So I think it's better than having some really the same animation you would do over and over and over again to knock out guards. That adds some creativity, I'd say some interest there, just to see what exactly you can knock guards out with. Getting spotted doesn't end the mission though. You just start fist fighting, it seems. Although if you fire your gun, you're then going to let everyone around you know that, yeah, you're there to take them out. But you do have your whip, and it seems like your whip can pull weapons out of enemies' hands, which that part sounds like it'd be pretty awesome to kind of like do that in motion, like see that all happen and unfold. And you can also use disguises to fool guards, although I think PC Gamer described that as they were heavily pushed towards where the disguise was, I guess by the guide that was there with them, kind of pointing them in that direction, and they questioned if that would be a more frustrating avenue of like, okay, what do I do kind of thing, which you run into in games. You just kind of spin around in a circle just about on the map trying to figure out where to go. In this case, you would have looked for a disguise, which then lets you go through a base pretty much without anyone assuming that you're there to steal stuff, which they did eventually get to a tomb raiding sequence, but they described it as a bit linear with simple puzzles and platforming. A lot of questions around, okay, are there other tombs that maybe are a bit more intricate or wide open? But a lot of the previews did share the same sentiment around the visuals, which they were incredibly impressive, and it is very true to the source material. So fans of Indiana Jones are going to be really, really excited seeing some of the set pieces and familiar characters. I mean, to me, so far, so good with these previews. Again, about 3 hours or so, and some of it was pretty guided, and it seemed like maybe the tomb that they were raiding was an earlier one, but I think so far at least sounds very, very interesting. And for Indiana Jones fans, you've probably already decided after seeing some of the trailers for this that you're either picking it up or, like many of us, probably downloading on Game Pass, but looking forward to checking this one out in that first week of December. Next up, let's talk about Sony and an email that was sent out by Herman Hulst announcing that 2 studios were shut down, and it looks like Concord, well, it's exactly how we figured. It's not coming back. We can see this posted up though. This is over on Sony Interactive's website, saying, as part of our ongoing efforts to strengthen SIE's studio business, we have had to make a difficult decision relating to 2 of our studios, Neon Koi and Firewalk Studios. While mobile remains a priority growth area for the studio business, we are in the very early stage of our mobile efforts. To achieve success in this area, we need to concentrate on titles that are in line with PlayStation Studios' pedigree and have the potential to reach more players globally. With this refocused approach, Neon Koi will close and its mobile action game will not be moving forward. That seems like the very PR business way to say their game wasn't very good, or it wasn't hitting certain milestones we had in place. They couldn't figure out the fun loop, or maybe it wasn't lining up with what they expect for mobile games, which of course we know, heavy monetization strategies. Either way, whatever Neon Koi was working on there with that action game wasn't panning out, at least in Sony's mind, and instead of, I guess, shifting focus, they decided to shut down what I believe was their first mobile studio? So Sony still seems interested in the mobile sector, but not with Neon Koi apparently leading the way on this action game. They go on to say, after much thought, we have determined the best path forward is to permanently sunset Concord and close the studio. I want to thank all of Firewalk for their craftsmanship, creative spirit, and dedication. We will take the lessons learned from Concord and continue to advance our live service capabilities to deliver future growth in this area. So a couple of things here. One, this shouldn't be surprising to anyone. I didn't see a path forward for Concord to return, especially not with that name. And I know there's that Amazon series coming up that's going to do an episode in the Concord universe, and that's going to be incredibly awkward when it happens, sure. But Concord's name was so tainted at this point, there was no coming back from that. And I don't even know if they'd be able to rework it into a free-to-play model, because typically you would have started development at least with that in mind, so you can shape the game around the idea of there being constant grinding and that carrot on a stick in front of you, but far out in front of you, so that you have to maybe spend money on digital currency or spend a lot of time in game in order to achieve these different things. Which then leads us to Firewalk, which unfortunately for them, they're a very expensive studio to keep around, and if Concord's not coming back, Sony, I don't think, is going to keep paying for Firewalk to start up development on another game when they couldn't figure out Concord. Why would they then greenlight something for an expensive studio that may or may not pan out in 5 or 6 years? What from Concord tells Sony that Firewalk is absolutely set up to tackle another live service game? There's really nothing there for that. And it seems like Sony still very interested in the live service avenue here. I think they're going to keep trying. This isn't a sign of them going, well, that's it, we're never going to try it again. No, we know Fair Games is coming up, and I feel like some other stuff is also in the pipeline coming down the road. But there was one other piece of news I wanted to finish up here that has to do with Concord. And in our last bit of news, let's talk about the budget for Concord, because we have some updated information on that. If you remember, there was a report out there from Colin Moriarty over on Sacred Symbols that seemed to place the budget in the neighborhood of $400 million. He was also kind of talking about maybe a range of it, like 300 to 400, somewhere in there, right? Basically, it was an exorbitant amount of money for what we ended up getting with Concord. Well, I figured some outlets would look into this somewhat and eventually post a follow-up to this, at least corroborating or just giving us more insight into how much money went into this game, and we got that. We can see this is posted up. This is over on Kotaku, who says the initial development deal for the game was just over $200 million, according to 2 sources familiar with the agreement, but who were not authorized to speak publicly about it. But Kotaku understands that amount was not enough to cover the game's entire development, and did not include, get this, the purchase of Concord IP rights or Firewalk Studios itself, which Sony acquired only last year. Also discussion that did not cover marketing, although you can make the case that marketing for Concord wasn't exactly heavy. It did feel like Sony looked at that and went, oh, okay, maybe this isn't the game we're going to push a ton. Although we do see that it is part of, again, that Amazon series, and we don't know what the money figure back forth, whoever, right, with that. But nonetheless, it appears even that $200 million was not enough to cover everything. And then there were other costs on top of that. And then what did Sony pay for Firewalk? Either way, whatever that total sum was, Concord, Firewalk, marketing, IP rights, it all to me adds up, and it all is a major failure for Sony in that regard. And yeah, it probably does amount, to be honest, at this point, looking at all the stipulations, that $200 million probably amounts close to $400 million. So that initial report that was eye-popping seeing that number probably was right. And that's rough for Sony. That is a tough one. And it seems like they say they are going to move on and learn from this, but seeing what's going on with their live service initiative, Bungie, not exactly going to plan right now. We see what happened here with Concord, and you do have to question, okay, how much money is Sony willing to lose? Because if that was a $400 million miss here, and then we see with Bungie, I mean, guys, they're approaching that $4 billion mark with acquisitions and projects that are not panning out, and then also the burn rate from Bungie after that purchase. So it does make you wonder how far they're going to go with this before maybe they step back and say, you know what, maybe it's better for us just to collect 30% of the Fortnite revenue, 30% of the Call of Duty revenue, and whatever big live service thing Ubisoft pushes out in a year or two, and just be satisfied there and stick with our single player games that we know works really well to push our hardware. But at least for now, they're going to try a couple more times, and we'll see what happens with Fair Games, because that's coming up soon, and that might be a big make or break for Haven based on what we saw here with Firewalk. And before we go to the comment of the day, we'll take a look at the poll that I posted up yesterday, where I ask, have you played Xenoblade Chronicles X? 79% say no, 21% say yes. I can't really fault people. I mean, it was on the Wii U, and that's just not many people bought the Wii U. That's just how it is. Xenoblade Chronicles X was left on that system, and it was rough. It was painful to see that, because it is a really cool game. Obviously a really cool entry in just the Xenoblade franchise, but just in general, it's a very different game from pretty much anything else, with a lot of the online features and stuff they had, the scales. There's a lot happening here, and for many people, it's their favorite Xenoblade game, and it's one that I fondly remember actually on the Wii U, mostly because while the Wii U was, the library wasn't terrible for first-party Nintendo stuff, but just overall, it wasn't incredible, and that was one that definitely stood out to me for like the 2 other people that I knew had Wii U's that we talked to. It wasn't exactly a big club. And we'll finish up with the comment of the day, as you're seeing here. This is from Cyan Ryan, saying, honestly, Dragon Age is not going to sell well for a AAA game. Well, that's the thing. It's like, what are expectations for some of these titles? Because Dragon Age Inquisition sold incredibly well for EA. They were actually shocked at how well it did. I think it was over 10 million copies lifetime. Will Dragon Age the Veilguard get to that point? I would assume no. But I guess anything's possible technically. It's just, what are EA's thoughts and expectations as to where this game needs to be? And that's really what it comes down to. So if they're thinking, oh, if this thing sells 3 million copies, we're good, and it does, okay, it didn't sell as much as some of the other big AAA games, but they'll be happy, I guess, with it. We'll get some initial numbers, I guess, next week out of the UK, but when physicals comes around, we obviously know that the physical market is much less than it was back with Inquisition when that comparison's made, so we'll have to see with things like Circana, where they will have digital results, and who knows, maybe it does really well randomly when it comes out, and EA or Bioware just drops some numbers, so we'll keep an eye out over the coming weeks for that. And ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it here for Newswave. If you enjoyed this video, guys, hit that like button. If not, hit the dislike. Leave comments down below about everything we talked about here today. If you missed yesterday's Newswave, I'll leave it up here in a card, or maybe you wanted to go over some of the digital physical splits for the PlayStation 5, as we did recently get some new numbers around those systems. I'll leave it in a card right below. Thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.